welcome back to the channel. And yeah, you know what the deal is. But yeah, MMA, UFC, it's done, man. Matter of fact, I feel like I just made this same video before, but I'm gonna make it again regardless. But I'm not even gonna try to do too much acting like I'm one of those I guess casuals or near what is the word to call these people that be so quick to say the sport's done and it's dying and it's boring and blah blah this and blah blah that. But yeah, one of those guys or girls or people. I'm not one of those people that always, soon as they feel like, oh, their favorite fighter lose, or a couple of champions aren't the type of fighters that they like, or they don't personally like them or personally enjoy to watch them, they all of a sudden think the sport is done and dry and boring, or the pay-per-views are underperforming, this and that. But yeah, you get the gist of things. But yeah, I'm not gonna do all that because I've literally probably made this video like 4 times before. I just make it again, and it's also gonna kind of play in like a little bit of a recap from what UFC 313, a little bit of a recap, but mainly just the main event because that's where the interest is at. Because people acting like because Ankalaev's the champion now and Bilal and Marab are champion, that the sport is all of a sudden boring or something or done and the pay-per-views and that. But what's really different than any other time? So yeah, I'm just hopping right into what's really different than any other time in MMA history. If anything, it's probably still nowhere near as worse as the earlier parts of the UFC when they first were trying to come in. They were barely having cards. You know, it was the technique wasn't there, the fights weren't there, and whatever. But with this era and plenty of other eras is of recent in the past 5, 10 years plus, you know, you're getting fights all the time. You're literally getting fights all the time. So if one card don't deliver, or the pay per view didn't deliver, you're gonna have plenty of these little fight nights that are gonna deliver. And that's gonna be with anything. Box, combat sports related. Matter of fact, any sports related really. You're gonna have might have some boring years here, boring there, or I'm not gonna say years. I'm not even gonna say that, but you're gonna have boring games, or you're gonna have boring fights, maybe boring cards here and there. Kind of. Especially when you talk about like pay per view, because at the end of the day, that's part of this is not WWE. This is fighting. This is a real sport. Like not to say that WWE athletes aren't real athletes. They're really doing backflips and all that stuff. They really gotta deliver, but it's scripted. Like I said, you're still getting smacked by wood. You're still getting semi kicked in the face and whatnot, and jumping off steel cage and stuff. But in UFC, MMA, it's a real fight. So people at the end of the day, like the smartest thing you can do is win. You could try to be exciting, but you try to be exciting, you're not gonna be champion. And people be like, "I love you," but they ain't gonna fill your pockets up. It's not gonna prevent you from getting CTE. So at the end of the day, like the smarter thing to do is win. So if the fight does end up being exciting, great. But if it's boring, it's gonna happen. Like especially high level fights when they've been training for their whole life to get to that point, and they got to go and win however they got to win. Sometimes it's gonna be boring, but I think more often than not, I mean not more often than not, but good at a good enough clip, they end up being exciting at a good enough clip. Because you got at the end of the day, you got the best fighters compete against the best fighters. And again, that's what other sport like basketball. You might go in a game and it might be a boring game where they trying to draw a whole lot of fouls and go to the 3 point line a whole lot. Well, not 3 point line, but yeah, well, I guess 3 point line. But they're trying to shoot foul shots or they're flopping a lot in the playoffs and the game. People are not like that. They would like a big physical game where they're driving to the basket and trying to dunk and get layups and contested shots and stuff. But they might go the safe right. They might try to play, play high level basketball. So where you're getting at, where I'm getting at is that these fights aren't going to always deliver, I guess, to people's extent. But that is nothing new. And even a lot of champions out now, they saying like, "Oh, I liked it when it was this era." People didn't like it in that era. Like Mighty Mouse was out there doing flying armbar. Well, but people like the flying armbar from Mighty. But when Mighty Mouse was beating Joseph Benavidez and John Dawson, especially like the second fight, people weren't really on his bandwagon. They were his whatever. I don't think he had pay. He was on mainly fighting on free cards. And people were like, "Oh, the flyweight division shouldn't even be there." They were complaining about the flyweight division the whole time he was champion. Like, "Oh, it's nobody good here. It's this, it's that." So like the whole time he wasn't there. He was an exciting fighter. He was a flyweight, but people weren't loving the division. So it's always gonna be like hindsight. Right now, people might not like it, but again, maybe 5, 10 years from now, people are like, "Oh, I miss when Ankalaev was champion and Bilal was champion. Bilal put up high value and he went for a lot of takedowns. This guy just literally just takes you down and lays on you, like no ground and pound, no nothing, wall install, and just lays in the guard and taps you. Like it's always gonna be somebody saying like, "Oh, this guy is this and this guy is that." Then 5 years later, they act like, "Oh, I love the guy." Like Kamaru Usman had like moments, but a good chunk of Kamaru Usman's reign, people weren't really feeling him till later on when he started knock out Masvidal and whatnot, and beat Kobe. Like, well, I guess, here and there. But yeah, like that's how it always is. Like that new champion feel. People always complain about it, but yeah, people are always going to complain about, oh, this is boring. That, and let me say another thing. I've been yapping. I haven't been using these my minutes wisely, I guess. But anyway, this is really just a yapping video, and I'm gonna yap. It's my channel. I'm gonna yap. But yeah, and also another thing. How many times do champions even fight a year? What is like realistically like 12? Well, no, it's 11 champions because they got rid of the women's featherweight. So it's like 11 divisions overall, 8 men's divisions. So like heavyweight to flyweight, 8 men's division. It's like 3 women's divisions. You know, they got the women's bantamweight, women's flyweight, and women's strawweight. So there's 11 total divisions, and there's probably gonna be like maybe like 30 at most championship fights a year. So like 30 championship fights a year, if it that. Probably realistically like 22-ish championship fights a year, because most champions are gonna fight like once a year. One might fight 2. Then you have Pereira, who was doing amazing thing. He was fighting like 3 times a year, but yeah, most of the champions not gonna barely fight. Some not even gonna fight this year. So you act like just because who the champions are, that makes the sport boring. Like if not, if Dustin Poirier is if Dustin Poirier was ever an actual champion, he never was. If Gaethje was ever actual UFC champion, he never was. If Chandler was ever actual UFC champion, he never was. And there's a bunch of other people like Matt Brown, like he was a exciting fighter, or Jeff Neal, he has had exciting fights, or Donald Cerrone has had exciting fights. He fought for belts, lost every single one, but he had plenty of exciting fights. Jim Miller, plenty of exciting fights. Diego Sanchez, plenty of exciting fights. These guys were never champions. So just because somebody's not a champion don't mean they can't, deliver great fights. Dan Hooker been in plenty of great fights. Just because he's not a champion don't mean that, the sport's boring because who the 8 or 11 people are that hold the belt. Like, it could be literally all boring champions. And that might make it boring. Like, all you're going to do is go fight the champion. Like, a boring fight the champion's going to lay on him for. And another thing, GSP was a pretty boring champion, if we're being honest. You act like these new champions are so boring. I feel like GSP, a big chunk of his championships were more boring than a lot of these other championships. As a matter of fact, a lot of GSP fights were way less competitive, way more boring than most of Bilal Muhammad fights, if we're being honest. GSP didn't throw a lot of volume. He had good takedown, but didn't really have the greatest ground and pound for a lot of points in his career. Wasn't able to really get the finish. So I feel like, if anything, GSP and Bilal, are largely the same fighter, broadly speaking. So you can't like Bilal's such a boring fighter. You were a GSP fan, because GSP is like one of the most decisionator champions in UFC history. And again, I like GSP, but let's be honest. Back in the day, I wasn't even tuning in GSP fights. I would watch them later on, like, I ain't paying to see GSP fight. He's gonna lay on this guy for this amount of time. Like, I would not pay for him. I would pay for other fighters' pay-per-views, but I wouldn't pay for GSP. I would go on later on, maybe get a DVD if it turned out good or something. Like when Condit knocked GSP down, I waited, I bought the DVD, then watched the fight or something. Whatever, but that was back then when I was in high school. Whatever. But whatever. Yeah, so to say that these champions are so boring or so this, so that, and also nothing, you so concerned about Dagestani fighters. Like, I might not be the biggest fan of Dagestani fighters, but by no means I'm like a hater, a legitimate hater of Dagestani fighters. Like a lot of these other YouTubers and MMA personalities and people in the comment section of this video and that video. But if that's your concern, the reality of it is the Dagestani success rate or success period is only a period just with a lot of other periods. Not to say that their success is going to stop or they're going to go extinct or something, but they didn't really get a champion. Well, they didn't get their first UFC champion till Khabib in 2018, and since then they have had 3 champions. Russia has had a little bit more, like because they had Piotr Jan, but they had Khabib, then Makhachev right at back to not back to back, but basically back to back at lightweight with Charles sandwiching it or in the middle. He's the meat of it. But yeah, you had Khabib, you had Islam, Piotr Jan in the mix, but he's not Dagestani, and now you got Magomed Ankalaev. But that's really like 3 Dagestani champs. So don't act like, this and that. Then another thing, let me call out another bias. And people talk about, I don't like the champions, but do they really even support the fighters that really be like, if they're Americans, like white Americans, who the main people I feel like are complaining. Like no racism or whatever. But I feel like the main people complaining are realistically like white Americans. I feel like those main people complaining. Not European. British people, they high-key very supportive because they'll stay up till 4 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. every single time a UFC fight come on. The diehard European fans, they'll stay up extremely late to watch the fights. Where it's like, they're catered to us Americans. Like the fight cards are catered to Americans. Us Americans. The UFC is an American corporation, so it's catered to us. But those European will say, I'm realistically saying like white Americans, the main ones complaining about, even though there are some European Americans complaining for sure. But anyway, I said European Americans. I made up the thing. Hey, dual citizenship is a thing, but nonetheless. But yeah, we're just talking about white fans, whether they're European or American, either way. Did they really tune in that big for these white champions outside of McGregor? They really tune in for these other guys. Maybe Chuck Liddell back in the day. But even then, like, how many real big white stars have there been in the UFC? Like Brock Lesnar. Like, they'll tune in for a couple people, like like Chuck Liddell, Brock Lesnar, and that's really about it. Like, where were they for Stipe? They were there for O'Malley a little bit, but O'Malley, as big as he think his star power was, his star power was like a quarter of what he thought it was. So they didn't show up as big as they could for Sean O'Malley. They didn't show up big for Stipe. Stipe, like the great white American hope, even though he was representing Croatia a little bit there when he first came in with those Croatian shorts. But he's a working man, blue collar man. Firefighter, fighting fires by day, fighting UFC fights by Saturday and whatnot. And they didn't really tune in for him. So people will say this, say that, but y'all complain about this and complain about that. But when the people deliver what you supposedly want, y'all ain't there for them. So like, just practice what you preach. If y'all complaining about this, when y'all get that All-American UFC fighter and they winning belts and defending belts and sending their legacy, be there, tune in. Don't be like, I ain't gonna tune in for that. They tune in more for people they hate than people they like or supposedly like. But it's so weird. Like, y'all complain about this and that, but when y'all do have it, y'all don't appreciate it. The same way, like, that's what everything. There's few fighters that actually get appreciation, when they're supposed to get it. Like Mighty Mouse, y'all didn't appreciate him until he was out of the UFC. I appreciated Mighty Mouse from the jump, but y'all didn't appreciate him until he was out of the UFC. Oh, why didn't nobody like Mighty Mouse? Blah blah. They didn't like this, they didn't like that. But y'all were the same. Well, the people that were there, pretty much the same mindset as y'all. Y'all like the same people, just younger. Like, it's a new generation, but y'all like the same way to the fighters this era that the fighters to the the fans, the same way the fans of that era acted to the fighters of that era. Y'all acting the same way to y'all fans of this era are acting the same way to fighters of this era. Like, y'all doing the same exact thing year after year, era after era. Like, oh, this is boring, that's boring. Oh, the sport is done. Like, Pereira didn't even start fighting in MMA, well, really getting the UFC to like 4 years ago. He accomplished so much. So y'all didn't even know he was going to be a dang or he's going to become what he became. So just assuming that the sport is going to be this and it's all boring down, it's nothing new. And if anything, this is not even a bad era. There has definitely been some bad era, like where you really didn't know where no real great talent was going to come from. And it seemed like nobody else was in the lineup. Like, oh, when Rampage was leaving, Chuck Liddell left, and it seemed like, who's going to be next? Who's going to be this? It's not even that. Like, you still got Islam Makhachev there, who's probably going to be there for another year or two, and he's been in good fights. You can't act like Islam Makhachev has been boring fights. Like, the Volkanovski one was a good fight. He knocked out Volkanovski in the rematch. The Poirier fight was a good fight. It should have been a good fight, but it ended up being a very good fight. Like, he was supposed to run through Poirier, but it ended up being a very competitive fight. So, Poirier, he's been in, not Poirier, but, well, obviously Poirier is a exciting fighter, but I'm saying as far as the champions, I'm talking about champions particularly. Even outside the champion, like, matter of fact, mostly outside the champion, that is most of the fights you're going to get are non-championship fights. You're going to have like 700, 800 non-championship fights or 500 non-championship fights, and you're going to have like 30 championship fights. So the bulk is going to be non-championship fights. And there's always going to be that building process. Like, oh, this card's not good. This card's not good. Then they can look back 5 years. This card was amazing. Like, people looking back when the card had Kamaru Usman and Ngannou on it before they were champions. At the time, nobody cared for that fight. I was there. No, I wasn't at the fight, but I was there. I remember nobody really caring for that fight. Same with the boring card. And they go back 5 years like, oh, that was an amazing card. You had this guy on that guy. Because it's the same thing now. You're going to have these guys like in the fighting nerds and people that aren't in the fighting nerds and other people that are going to go on to be champions on these cards. And they'll put on great performances. Like, we first see the, in the time, in the present, watching the, or, expecting and waiting for the card and trying to get excited for a card. You might look at it like, oh, there's no star power. But you see, the talent is already there. It's just a matter of putting on a performance that's going to get your attention. But these guys have the talent and the skill to put on performances that's going to get your attention. And that's going to be able to make some of these guys future champions. So you can't really sleep on these cards. And even some of these cards, like even 313, you had a couple exciting finishes on it. You had Marisa Ruffy with that finish. Or was that even 313? I think it was 313. But anyway, you get the point that yes, always gonna be new stars. There's always be new stars. You can act like there ain't gonna be new stars. As long as the money there, as long as the talent there, as long as they keep it the umbrella that this is where the best fighters fight and they keep up that up, the best fighters gonna keep flocking here. And when the best fight the best, well, even if it's boring, you at least get seeing the best fight the best. And a lot of times when the best fight the best, you get the best out of the best. You get the highest level of MMA when the best are fighting the best and the best are around the best, fighting and beating the best to be the best. That's when you're gonna get the best stuff, regardless. And sometimes it might be a little bit boring, but it is what it is. And even the Pereira versus Ankalaev fight, it wasn't really that boring. I wouldn't say it was boring. And I might have want Pereira to win, but I can't act like that was a boring performance. Ankalaev for the smart fight, he mixed in the grappling and the threat of the grappling to get his strikes off and kind of stunt Pereira a little bit. And even in that, Pereira still won the first. He won the fifth. Some people argue he won the third, but he still won some rounds. He still had some exciting moments. Ankalaev wasn't out there just particularly looking to just take him down and lay on him. And he didn't get no takedowns, if anything. But still, they had a couple good striking rounds. I think the first through the third were largely striking rounds. Then like the fourth and fifth, kind of a little bit more control, but then Pereira got a little bit striking the fifth. So it really wasn't a boring fight. And Ankalaev fought the fight he needed to fight, and he came out and won. And there had been a lot more boring championship fights. It's not a fight I would go back and look at it and like, oh my God, that was such a good fight. I want to watch it again. But it's not a fight that, if I saw they fought again, they had the same exact fight, I would tune in and watch it. I guess, but and I wouldn't be like bored. I'd be attent the whole time because again, it was always a threat that Pereira could chew his leg up and Ankalaev might limp, or Pereira might catch him with his hook, or Ankalaev might knock him out. It was a constant. It was for the most part when they weren't clinching, which wasn't the whole entire fight, that you felt like either one of them could knock the other one out. Especially Ankalaev was having success hurting Pereira more than Pereira was hurting Ankalaev. But so it wasn't a boring fight. And Ankalaev, another thing. Then you talk about champions boring and boring. Let me just kind of go through all the champions right now and say our divisions, the men's divisions at least, and try to just really just show you that it's not really boring at all right now. It's still a great time to be a UFC fan, MMA fan. Heavyweight, you still got John Jones, great legacy. You could still potentially get the Aspinall fight versus John Jones, which would be a huge fight, one of the hugest fights in UFC history. Maybe the hugest fight, biggest fight in UFC. Well, I'm not going to say because McGregor, ticket-wise, he's always going to pretty much beat everyone. But as far as skill-wise, an actual good fight, John over Aspinall might be the combination of sales and actual good fight that they UFC could ever make, maybe. John Jones versus Aspinall, that could be a good fight. If it does happen. Then if John Jones retires, Aspinall is a great young champion. He goes out there and do what people say they want to see. He finishes fights very quickly for the most part. So Aspinall's going to deliver. Like John Jones is a great fighter, has a great history, has been a pretty exciting fighter for most of his career and most of his fights. So John Jones is a good champion, or at least he's a good fighter. You might say right now he's not the best champion because he's not fighting Aspinall, so that don't make him a good champion. And that's a good critique. But you can't really say that John Jones is such a boring fight. John Jones has good fights. It has had good fights his whole career for the most part. Maybe a couple of fights that you might say two or three boring ones, but for the most part, pretty good fights on John Jones' side. And Aspinall, a finisher, so whoever ends up being the champion in that one, you got a good champion at that weight class. And some okay contenders coming up. Okay enough. Maybe like two of them. Or at least two challengers. Maybe not up-and-coming guys, but at least two decent matchups you can make more in there depending on who becomes champion or remains champion. And then light heavyweight, Ankalaev. Ankalaev has, for the most part, been a finisher. Knocking a lot of guys out. So he's primarily a striker. He's not really a lay-on-you guy. In the Jan Blachowicz fight, he had to turn into a laying guy because legs got chewed up. But if Ankalaev had it his way, he wants to knock you out. So Ankalaev don't really have very many boring fights. He's mostly a finisher, if anything. Striker and mostly a finisher. So you can't really act like Ankalaev's a boring fighter. He's not. He did what he had to do, and it still was an exciting fight, in my honest opinion. Then middleweight, Dricus, he might be sloppy, but it works, and he's high pace, high intensity. So he's not a boring fighter at all, boring champion. You might not like him, but not a boring fighter. I guess then you can kind of say, like, are these guys going to sell tickets? Like, obviously John Jones going to sell tickets. He has been selling tickets. Aspinall, a question mark, but John Jones versus Aspinall, that's definitely going to sell tickets and pay-per-views. But yeah, then lightweight, Ankalaev probably not going to sell tickets, but you probably could throw him in Abu Dhabi or one of these little Muslim countries over there and Fight Island or something, and he'll be the perfect fighter to headline one of those events if he stays champion. That'll be perfect for him. So he could get the UFC money in other ways. So light heavyweight, Middleweight, Dreykus. Uh, Depending on the matchup, you can sell because you got Combs out there. So Dreykus might not be able to sell tickets, but the fighters he's fighting can sell tickets. So Combs versus Dreykus will sell a lot of tickets. You know, if Kyle with the fighting nerds keep getting bigger and bigger, that could sell tickets. In my evolve, that'd be a great fight. A guy that definitely has a chance to beat Dreykus, that could sell tickets. Maybe not great tickets, but maybe like 300,000, 400,000, maybe around that mark, which would still a great card and maybe get some good complimenting fights. That could definitely sell some pay per views. So Dreykus again might not be a big star, but he definitely is a guy that has a lot of good contenders. So it don't always have to be about the champion being such a big star. It could be about them having good contenders. And he's young enough and he has, a good couple contenders that, he could fight and maybe even rematch. Have a good little reign for like 3 years if he stays champion. And maybe people start loving like a lot of these other champions. Like they don't love these champions originally, initially, but over time he keeps winning. He keeps being charming, and Drickus does have a charm to him. Like Mac McAlive is boring. He like a rock. He boring as mug. But Drickus, as annoying as he is, and I'm not really a big fan of him. Like he does have charisma. He can talk trash and stuff. He is a funny guy. Ankalaev, like really, outside of his fighting skills, he's really like a boring guy. He's trying to be more exciting, but Ankalaev like still pretty boring. Like it's a hard sell. But Drickus, he's more sellable, marketable, and got good fights waiting for him. And then let's see, that's the middleweight. Welterweight, Bilal Muhammad probably ain't gonna be champion too long. He's already like 36, 37. He has been in UFC a long time. He's one of those guys that like a late bloomer, I guess. He finally got his chance, like kind of like Bisping did later in his career. So Bilal might be able to hold the belt for maybe 2-3 defenses, maybe maximum, which is still a great feat and puts you in well below the 1%. Like you like in the 0.4%. It's very few people that have even one belts, let alone defend them 3 times. So Bilal could potentially defend the belt 3 times. Potentially. I'll say realistically by maybe like once or twice. But yeah, so if you don't like Bilal, he probably ain't gonna be champion long anyway. And that's not even no disrespect to Bilal. Given his age, and given that there are some great young contenders coming up, and he's only gonna get older. And even the people that's right there right now could, like Jack Della Maddalena could definitely upset him. Shavkat could definitely beat him. Not to say that he will or these guys will beat him or whatever. I'm saying they definitely can beat him, especially Shavkat. Jack Della Maddalena is definitely more of a wild card, but I wouldn't be surprised if he catch Bilal. Bilal has been caught before, and if he starts feeling himself too much, like he's been feeling him too much, at least from my perspective, that could be the type of fights that you will lose. Like you think you're like, oh, this is an easy matchup for me. And he did like he starts smelling his own Kool-Aid. He's been a dog in pretty much like his last 7 fights. Now he'll be a sizable favorite, and he starts feeling himself. He starts I don't know whatever. He's off the ball against Jack Della Maddalena. Maddalena will be the guy that will catch him and put him out if he starts feeling himself too much and he underestimates his opponent. Thinking like it's an easy stylistic matchup on paper, which it should be. But if you don't show up, it's definitely the matchup that will humble you real quick. But yeah, Bilal got some good, interesting matchups coming. I'm not saying Price is right there, but you got Ian Gary could win a fight and be back there. You got maybe Kamaru Usman might be able to politic his way back in there. You got Shavkat, Jack Maddalena. You got some good fights for him, and only gonna get more. So there's plenty of guys young enough, and in the next 2 years that might hit their peak and they hit their stride, and they'll be fighting for the belt, and they can give them some good challenges. So. Bilal might not be a guy that can sell tickets, but you could definitely give us a matchup. At least Shavkat in the most, Shavkat least the closest to that is a matchup that could sell tickets because they might not buy it for Bilal, they might not buy it for Shavkat, but they might buy it for the fact that it's Bilal versus Shavkat, and Shavkat could beat Bilal, so that could potentially sell tickets, especially with a good background cast. But again, it's not a champion that you're going to particularly love, but I can't act like that's a bad champion. Like, oh, this champion is so terrible, sports so terrible. It's not. Lightweight, again, I already said Islam Makhachev has been putting in work. He has accomplished a lot. He's not a born champion. He already showed that he could draw interest, and he's the pound #1 for a reason. So there's no real need to say nothing about. You can't really say nothing too bad about Makhachev, and he's already one of the greatest fighters of all time. Maybe I could say, comfortably say he's top 10. Maybe I comfortably say he's accomplished more than Khabib. Say those things. So I could say he should have a top 10 UFC spot on most people's list, I guess, are pound ranking, their personal pound rankings or whatever, based on actual accomplishments and skills, not just based on who you like more. But yeah, he should be on a lot of people's top 10. Featherweight, Ilya. Another thing, 24 minutes in, 25 minutes in, I ain't saying nothing about Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is still young. He's talking about retiring young, which is, I don't really love it a whole lot, but he could still be a great, exciting fighter for the next 2-3 years. So until somebody else come around, if he say he gonna retire the next 2-3 years when he's 30 or something, that's still 2-3 years. You got a great fighter who's delivering what people say they want to deliver. Like, he's knocking people out. He's going out there, amazing talent, big power, high level skills everywhere. He's knocking people out. What more can you ask for? He's doing what you guys literally say you want. So you can't act like the UFC don't have no stars. They still got Ilia Topuria, who's still only like 27 years old and gonna be here for the next 2-3 years. Maybe injury occurs, maybe this occurs, we lose some of that, but that's a exciting fighter for the next 2-3 years. And he could decide to go back to featherweight and have great fights there, or he could continue to say he's gonna stay at lightweight and he could have plenty of great fights there with Charles Oliveira, Poirier, Gaethje, Islam Makhachev, and whoever else come up next. He can have some great fights for the next 2-3 years. So that's one big star right there. That's already a star. He might not have truly proven it, I guess, yet. He's not doing McGregor numbers or Rousey numbers or Lesnar numbers or nothing like that, or Khabib numbers, or even John's number or some other people number. But I think he have a star if they market him right and he keeps delivering. I think he could be one of those guys that could start selling 700,000 consistently or 800,000 consistently or something like that. With the right matchup, or even get a couple million with the like a million pay-per-view with the Makhachev one potentially if they do it the right way and don't try to just do it in like one of those bullet companies. Like this. Do it like in America. Do it like in New York or something. Do it in Vegas or something, and that could do a million pay-per-view buys if promoted right. So yeah, then featherweight. I mean, I don't really like with the featherweight division right now with Ilya leaving the division so early, but you can't act like Volkanovski. Y'all don't like Volkanovski, and if he wins it, he's a champion. And then what's his name? Diego Lopez is an exciting fighter. Skill might be a little bit of a question mark as far as overall skill and his overall championship acumen. Like he kind of fades in even 3-round fights. So is he really a championship material? That's the question mark. But you can't like if he became champion, he wouldn't be an exciting champion. He's an exciting fighter at the end of the day. So that's an exciting fighter. So you can't like that's a boring fighter or a boring matchup. So and there's other good fighters coming up in the featherweight division. You got fighting nerds across 4 different weight classes. They got middleweight talent, in Kyle Bahayo. They got welterweight champion in Paredes. They got a lightweight champion. I mean, I said lightweight champion. A lightweight prospect in Ruffy, and you got John Silver. So you got in 4 different weight classes. You got fighting nerds, and these aren't guys that are over the hill. These guys are hot and streaking upwards. So they could be doing good for the next 2-3 years. Maybe they don't all win belts or all even fight for belts. But they'll all probably at least be putting on exciting fights for the next 3 years. Whether it be champions or not. Whether they take losses or not, they'll be putting on exciting fights. They're all exciting fights. Maybe Bahayo isn't the most exciting one out of them. He does have exciting fights, but he can tend to grapple a lot more sometimes, and that could be boring fights. But John Silver, he brings it every single time. He looks to knock you out. Ruffy looks to knock you out. And Prates looks to knock you out. That's like all Prates got. He just looks to knock you out. So, those exciting guys didn't. At featherweight, you got, again, John Silver's at featherweight. You got something like Rome Murphy. You got some other guys still good in that weight class. Yair's still in that weight class. So, where's the sport boring at? You still got these fighters. You still got Gaethje still in the sport. Just had a exciting fight on 313. You got Poirier, probably one more fight left. You got Holloway still around. So, there's plenty of fighters that are exciting. Like, plenty of them that are exciting. Then, that's featherweight. Bantamweight. Truly exciting division. You might say, "Oh, Rob is boring. Rob is that," but Rob is not one of the guys that's purely just take you down and do nothing. When he's down there, he's working. When he's fighting you, nonstop pressure, nonstop pace. If any, you think Kobe Covington is exciting. Rob is a more exciting fighter of a similar style, like constant pressure, constant takedowns. It's constant work. It's not a guy that just take you down and just tries to go for a weak Kimura the whole fight, and then it slaps you on the side the whole time and lands like 2 significant strikes a fight. He go out there, he probably lands like 60 significant strikes a fight, goes for 30 takedowns. It might not be the fight you like, but you can't really say that Marab is a truly boring fighter. He's out there pushing the pace nonstop. Like I said, and even if it's not your style of fight, you gotta appreciate it. And you can enjoy the amount of insane shape that he is in to do what he does. And I can't really say, like, was his Piotr Jan fight boring? No. Maybe the Sean O'Malley fight was a little bit boring, but was his Umar fight boring? Nah. So maybe the Aldo and O'Malley fight were a bit boring. But outside that, like, I feel like the majority of his fights have been pretty exciting. He hasn't really been looking out there to just hold a leg and do nothing. He's been out there looking to work. With Aldo's defense was just so good, so he couldn't really get nothing off, and he didn't really want it. He had to do what he had to do. He couldn't afford to just strike with Aldo. He get knocked out, so he had to go for takedowns. He couldn't get takedowns, so he just working against the fence. And O'Malley, big fight. He had to do what he had to do. But now he still pushes a crazy pace, so most of his fights are exciting. I can't. And Rob has a great internet personality. He's out there making, funny videos and funny things. So Rob's not a boring guy. He's a funny guy, great personality, and a high pace, exciting style for the most part. It may not be the knockout guy, but he's not a guy out there gassing and slow output. I really see a fighter like that. It's constant work to the guy that has big power and gas at the first round and looking tired and just loaded up on one shot the whole fight. And then when he hits that home run, he like all cheering and doing backwards. I'd rather see a guy that can push a pace, not crazy pace, for 5 minutes than that. So for 5 rounds than that. 5-minute rounds, 5 rounds than guy who's gassing out after throwing 5 overhands. So Rob's a exciting fighter in my opinion. And if anybody's saying he's a boring fighter, then that's really on them. That's a you thing. That's a you problem. And then flyweight, what's his name? Pantoja. I would say Pantoja maybe a little bit boring than Merab, maybe, because he can be like a gassy grappler. Like he'll come out there for a good strong first round, then he kind of just wills away to win, gassing and tired in the later rounds. And yeah, he kind of in that category that maybe y'all complain about, and I could complain about a little bit. But nonetheless, he still has exciting fights. I feel like the Moreno fights the Moreno title fight was exciting and back and forth. The Usyk fight was exciting. The Royval fight was a little bit boring at points, but I can't really say it was a truly boring fight. And then he just got a stoppage over Asakura in his last fight, so he's not really truly even a boring fighter, to be honest. It might be a heavy grappling style, but it's not boring by no means. He's not a guy out that's looking to, and he could be a lot more boring if he wanted to be honest. He could go out there and just be positioned over submission and just lay on you and not do nothing. But a lot of times when he's on the ground, he's looking to pass, he's looking to do damage. So he's not really even a boring type. Like, because he literally could just lock down half guard and just be boring. Or they try to take it back and do body locks and just do nothing. But a lot of times he be trying to work for those positions, and that's a lot of times how his opponents are able to get up at times because he's trying to finish you. So I can't even say Pantoja is even truly a boring champion because he's, again, a lot of times he can't. Matter of fact, he really like 50-50 for the most part on position versus submission. If not, maybe even more so 60% submission over position a lot of times. He's definitely not one of those guys that's looking to, I got to hold you down for dear life. And he can strike as well because he's not a one-dimensional fighter. Like, he can strike with you. It might be a little bit awkward, but he can definitely hurt you on the feet. He can definitely finish you on the feet. And he'll definitely look to do damage on the feet as well. And he can win minutes on the feet. So, who's this V5 from guy? But, yeah, so I can't really say Pantoja even a truly boring champion. Again, maybe these guys can't really sell tickets like that for the most part. But heavyweight, John Jones asked when they can sell tickets. Drickus has the matchups to sell tickets. Pereira still probably get a rematch. So the light heavyweight division still has, going to have some sellable fights, or at least a sellable fight in this next fight, at least. Middleweight, Drickus has sellable fights with Khamzat and Bahayo and Maivov. Welterweight, Vlad has a sellable fight with Shavkat. Lightweight, Makhachev already has solidified himself as a star, and he has sellable fights coming up. Well, Gaethje should be an easy fight if that's what they're going to do next. But, Topuria, if that's next, then Topuria obviously a sellable fight, regardless for it being a real good matchup, and the fact that Topuria is a star, Makhachev is a star, so lightweight you can't really complain too much about it. Featherweight, y'all love Volkanovski now. Y'all didn't love him in the past. I didn't love him in the past. I don't love him now, but I can definitely say people truly switched up. I respect him a lot more. I always respect him, but I wasn't a big fan of Volkanovski that much. And I know a lot of people definitely didn't like Volkanovski until later on in his career. I appreciated him a little bit more, but I never turned into a fan of Volkanovski. Like, I'm not a Volkanovski fan, but yeah. Apparently, it made diehards love him, so y'all can't complain too much about that because y'all like Volkanovski. So if he becomes champion again, that's good for y'all. And Diego Lopez, whether you like him or not, he's an exciting fighter, so you can't say he's boring. He might not sell no tickets. If is a champion. Maybe, maybe not. But also, I think Diego Lopez is the guy who can, has enough personality and already has a aesthetic to him that if he does become champion, I think he can sell some tickets, especially with some good matchups, and especially with a decent co-main event. You put a decent card together and he's headlining. I think he could sell tickets if he becomes champion. And Volkanovski already showed that he's been a champion. He could sell tickets. And yeah, but you get the gist of it. I think most of these champions are good. It might not be a crop of guys that are just like all pay per view stars by themselves, but again, you got enough. And then there are still in positions where also a lot of these guys are fresh champions, so they gotta build their reign up. And then if that gives them another chance, they could build up a reign and get some streaking and start getting some defenses. Then they can really turn into stars as well. So you can't really write them out just yet. Like, oh, these guys aren't this, these guys aren't that. A lot of these guys are just becoming champion. Like Law just became champion. Ankalaev just became champion. Rob just became champion. So a lot of these guys are, either just getting the belt or are only like one defense to getting the belt. Taporia got the belt, got one defense drop. So, yeah. The sport is good. The sport is good. And then last but not least, you guys complain about lack of Americans. I don't feel like right now there are no real breakout American fighters that are, oh, this guy's definitely going to fight for a belt. This guy's definitely going to win a belt. I can't really say that right now. And that is a weird period for American MMA. But I definitely think there's a lot of sleepers already in the sport. And just like how you can have these other guys like Bilal, even though he doesn't really claim America or as far as his flag, his fighting, he's American. Like it took him a while to get there. And he got Bo Nichols, at middleweight. You might not feel like, oh, this guy don't really seem like champion material, but he's only like 7 fights into his pro career. Or 8. So, would it be a shocker if he became champion at some point in his career? He's only like, I think, not even 30 yet. And, if he starts get more experience and striking sharpens up, this guy could be the limit for him. Am I saying he's like a for sure champion like I see some other guys in the past? No, but that doesn't stop him from being a future champion. So a lot of these American guys, I feel like they're good. There's still plenty of American fighters in the sport, plenty of young American fighters, but yeah, plenty of them. But I feel like for the most part, it's gonna be a case that it might have to take them more time. They're not gonna be those guys that's gonna go in there and just be undefeated all the way through. They might drop a couple losses and they learn from them. Then later on, when they're like 30, 31, 32, 33, or whatever the case may be, maybe 35, then you start to see someone become champion. But right now, you may not see it. You might say, like, where did Americans come from? But a lot of them are already in the sport, whether they're not in the UFC already or in the UFC, and that is kind of like building and developing. But they're definitely there, and I definitely would not count any of them out to say that they're not going to be no champion. Like, Peyton Talbot might turn around and turn the corner and become champion. Like, he might fix the wrestling, fix striking. He's only still very young. He could become champion. Bo Nickel, he could become champion. No one really at heavyweight, light heavyweight. Not really too many Americans right now at light heavyweight. And not too long ago, Jamal Hill was champion. Like, Jamal Hill wasn't somebody that I initially saw be champion. He even ended up becoming champion. So, again, a guy that you didn't expect to become champion, he became champion. But Jamal Hill did. And so middleweight, again, I already said Bo Nickel. And there's probably some other guys coming up. Sean Brady at welterweight, you might be surprised. He might low-key become champion. It wouldn't be surprised me if Sean Brady became champion. Not to say that he is, but Sean Brady does have all the skills to be a champion. High-level grappling, great cardio, striking improvement. He could become champion at welterweight. I'm not saying he will, but I would not be surprised if he turned the corner and he's young enough. He catch Bilal in a rematch and Sean Brady like 32, 33 at a time, or however old he's at the time, and Bilal's like 39. He'll be in a perfect position to beat him in a rematch. They got some other tough matchups around there, but it would not surprise me. What else you got there? You got Joe Pyfer at middleweight. Joe Pyfer could potentially become a champion in the future. Potentially. I'm not saying he will, but he's a live middleweight. He's definitely live. American middleweight, that's live. And also, he brings exciting fights, so you got like, oh, he's a boring fighter. I don't want to be champion. Like, you might not like him personally, but he knocks people out. Big, young middleweight that knocks people out. He has wrestling and grappling, so he could potentially become champion. But yeah, you get the gist. They might not be there right now. They might not jump off the page like, oh, this guy's going to be this, guy's going to be that. But there are young American stars. Some of them may have took losses. Some of them might not be all there yet, but they're young, they're talented, and they have, that youthful upside that they can develop and grow into themselves. And it is definitely not very uncommon. It's definitely not uncommon at all that some of these fighters, everybody's not an early bloomer. Everybody's not John Jones. Everybody's not these guys that just come in and just take over the sport. Everyone's not an Aldo. Everyone's not a Shogun or whatever. The majority of fighters, they take a while to build into the fighters that they need to be to become champions. They don't just come in and already like, oh, this guy about to be champion or whatever. They all ain't that. Everybody in the guy that become champion in 2-3. Like, look at Charles Oliveira. He took a long time to become champion. He took like 10 losses before he became champion. You know, went down to like featherweight, started lightweight, went to featherweight, came back up. Like Robbie Lawler, you know, started young in the UFC. He left, he got cut or left the UFC, went across like 20 different organizations, came back to the UFC, and then in his 30s he became a champion. So don't count none of these guys out. And again, they're only about how many UFC fights a year? I mean, about what 20-ish UFC championship fights a year, and there are plenty more regular fights a year. And out of those regular fights, you're going to get plenty of these young talents that are going to be the next star. So to say the sport is decaying or this is that or it's a bad spot, it's no worse spot than ever has been. I feel like, if anything, this is still one of the better areas of MMA because you're getting hollow fights, plenty of fights, week after week after week for the most part. And yeah, skills getting better, this is getting better. And I'm pretty much repeating myself at this point, but yeah, there are only like 20 championship fights a year. So if you're so worried about sport because of the champions of the sport, and even then the champions are actually still pretty good champions in my opinion. You're so worried about just the champions. There's only 20 fights that are like championship fights. So the more fights you're going to be seeing is the non-championship fights. And there are plenty of exciting fighters that aren't champion. And probably never are going to be champion. But there are plenty of exciting fighters that aren't champions. That are in the UFC. There's plenty of fighters that may be future champions that aren't champions now that are going to join the UFC. And there's plenty of guys that are great exciting fighters that are going to join the UFC later on that aren't going to become champions. So yeah, the majority of fights aren't championship fights. And there are, I would say, at least 30 exciting fighters, you know, in the UFC. At least 30. And I'm being very modest with that. At least 30. I'll say realistically it's about like maybe 60, 70. Well, that's probably a stretch. Like 60 exciting fighters in the UFC. Like 60. It might be like 300 fighters. Like there's 60 consistently exciting fighters in the UFC. That's what I would say. That would be my estimate, my guess. Maybe more. And this guy says 60 consistently exciting fighters. I don't mean that every other fighter is boring or have completely boring fights. I'm saying like fighters you can watch that you can watch and you won't really see a boring fight from them is what I'm saying. Or you won't see that very much. You might see like they might have 30 fights, they might have like 4 boring or 5 boring fights out of that 30 fights. Is what I'm saying. Or they have 20 UFC fights or 15 UFC fights. They might have 12 exciting fights and maybe 3 boring ones or 2 boring ones, something like that. So yeah. But all I'm going to say at the end of the video is that the sport is in a good spot. It's nothing different than it has ever been. You might not like the champions now, but appreciate them because the moment you start appreciating them, you wait too late. They're going to be gone. There's going to be some other guy you're not going to appreciate. But hey, maybe you can start appreciating that guy earlier on like you should have did with this fighter. That's a champion now. But and as far as Ankalaev, I feel like I might have one Pereira to win, but Ankalaev did what he had to do. Now, I wouldn't say it was a boring fight. And I'm definitely not going to try to be one of the people who try to paint Ankalaev as a boring fighter. Ankalaev is an exciting fighter. And I have enjoyed a lot of his fights. So, I think he's a good fighter. He might be boring as a personality. Might not sell no tickets. Maybe in the future. It's all hypothetical. We don't know. He could end up being the biggest star in UFC history all of a sudden. Like, stuff happens. But Ankalaev's not a boring fighter. And he did what he had to do in that fight. And again, the UFC is in a good spot. But that has been a video. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and come back for more videos. Peace out.